You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information. The views and opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily represent those of the network, its advertisers, owners, or sponsors.
Welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm Lynne, a writer, entrepreneur, and change maker, and I've dedicated my life to sharing stories of how people make meaning in their work and find purpose in their lives. You just heard a great original composition by my son, Asher Schreiber. This podcast highlights some of the great ideas and activities people do every day to make the world a better place. So much of the meaning we find comes from interacting with great people, developing relationships that are mutually beneficial, and doing work that inspires. I hope you'll be inspired by the people you meet on this podcast. We all need to find a way to make meaning in the mundane. I'm speaking today to Mike Forsyth, owner and founder of Detroit City Distillery. Welcome to Make Meaning, Mike.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was so nice to sort of get to know you in the Goldman Sachs program. But I'm really excited to talk with you more today about your business and what brought you to creating spirits.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about that journey. How did you end up here?
Sure. So Detroit City Distillery, we make craft whiskeys, bourbon and rye, a lot of different gins and vodka in the heart of Eastern Market. But the journey actually started a long time ago. So the business is owned by 8 of my best friends.
8 of your best friends?
Yes.
How does that happen?
Well, so you grow up in a little town called Bath, Michigan, and basically there's nothing to do.
Okay.
So when we were, 16 or so, the guy who bought us beer left town, right?
I love it.
And, necessity initiates invention. So we, basically the internet had just been invented and I was the bad one. So I went online and figured out how to make our own alcohol.
Nice.
Yeah. So, our very first batch was white grape juice, yeast, and sugar.
Okay.
I learned a little bit about fermentation in 2 weeks, right? It's like a chemical reaction that takes place, like CO2.
Sure.
Heat, and if there's nowhere for it to go, it explodes all over your room.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
I hope my kids are not listening to this podcast at this
No.
moment.
Well, my parents always questioned if I was going to turn out all right, and, we actually did. So
I'd say yes.
yes.
Good job.
For the most part. So, this inspired this group of kids to start a microbrewery, and we moved the operation outside. We scaled it up. We were slinging booze in Bath High School parking lot,
my gosh.
trying unsuccessfully to get girls. And so it inspired the smart one out of the group, JP, who's our master distiller, to go to school and learn how to make beer.
Okay.
So he has a PhD in microbiology. He worked at Bell's Brewery for a long time. And he started teaching brewing and distillation at Michigan State.
Oh, wow.
And there's actually a huge distillery off campus at Michigan State. They have one of the leading R&D facilities in the world for spirits.
So cool. Who knew?
And so JP was teaching for the guy who started it. And we went to a bachelor party and sounded like a good idea after a weekend of drinking. And here we are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you started Detroit City Distillery how long ago?
Yeah, so the business has been open about 3.5 years.
Okay.
So we started, basically renovated an old slaughterhouse in Eastern Market. There was nothing there, no water, no electricity, no heat or anything. And so transformed that into a full-on cocktail bar with a little tasting room. So that's been open for 3.5 years. And then we just scaled up to what we call the whiskey factory. So that's where we mass produce everything. That's in the old Stroh's ice cream
Nice.
Facility. And prior to that was the old Goebel's brewery.
Okay.
So a lot of history, and that's an important thing for us. When we talk about, making meaning, and when you're a new business in Detroit, being able to be a part of that history and kind of honor that, with your own new take is important, but you kind of always got to respect where you came from in the past. So
100%.
We're new, but, part of a very long history of making alcohol in Detroit.
That's
so
awesome.
We love that.
You know, I went to visit a really good friend of mine in London last November. And the first night I got there, and I've known her for 25 years, but hadn't seen her in 20. So she was all excited. We've been writing letters, actual letters, all these years. I should actually get her on the show, right? That's about making meaning. But anyway, she wanted me to meet her friends. They thought it was really interesting that we've been writing letters by hand and mailing them for all these years. And so despite jet lag, I went with her to this dinner. It was a local chef who's been on one of the British, cooking shows. And she lives in London and she hosts these dinners at her house. And it's like a group of friends. You pay to come. You got the butcher paper on the table.
Sure.
She writes the menu on it. You bring your own booze. And so I'm sitting there with all these really cool, very global Londoners, and all they wanted to know about was Detroit.
Sure,
they're like, "Oh, it's the destination now, and it's up and coming, and what's going on with entrepreneurship in Detroit?" Right. And I'm a big Detroit defender. I've always been really proud of it, and that I'm from here. And I think we do have a lot of legacies in entrepreneurship. I come from an entrepreneurial family, but I feel like Detroit is one of those scrappy, salt of the earth startup places,
right.
Throughout history. Right. And we weather the changes regardless of what comes our way,
right.
So, I mean, do you feel like you fit into that storyline?
Yeah. So, and that's a fun thing about owning a business in Detroit. So, right, there's all the history that you get to be a part of, right? So, I mean, really back in, the 20s through 50s, Detroit was the Silicon Valley of its day, right?
Right.
And so, Detroit has kind of defined the standard for American craftsmanship. Yep. So that really plays into our brand and our philosophy of how we actually make things. So, it's kind of a little known fact, maybe a little dirty secret that, most craft spirits are not actually produced in a craft way, right? Okay. They're usually bought from a large distillery and repackaged, and it's more of a branding exercise, which there's nothing wrong with that per se. But, for us, kind of embracing the brand as part of our brand, right? We're Detroit City Distillery. Mm-hmm. We need to kind of honor that standard of craftsmanship. So we're making everything from scratch with Michigan grains, and, we're an Eastern market where, farmers have been coming for 150 years, right? Yep. So we're able to develop relationships with those people. Londoners love their gin. Mm-hmm. We work with like 100-year-old spice company, Germac, to get all our botanicals for all our gin.
2 blocks from where you're located.
2 blocks from where we're located, right? It's like our local candy store, except it's for gin. Yeah. And so, that ability to kind of make things, and then two, if you're in the business of making alcohol, you're really in the business of celebrating things.
Yes.
And so, when you talk to me a little bit about this, making meaning. What's cool about the business is we get to help others celebrate what is meaningful to them.
Sure.
Right? And so being kind of a venue and a vehicle to do that is really fun. So there's kind of multiple layers to it. And celebrating is always great, especially when it involves good craft spirits in the process.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
I love, when I was there recently, I loved that you had a pine-infused whiskey. Is that right?
Pine-infused gin.
Gin.
Yes.
And the pine was from your family farm in Bath.
Yes.
So tell me about that. I really love that little detail.
Yeah. So it's called Peacemaker Gin.
Uh-huh.
And we wanted to basically create Michigan in a bottle. Mm-hmm. So I grew up 40 acres out in the country. My dad had a landscape company, so I also come from an entrepreneurial family. Uh-huh. And so we have all these pine trees. Mm-hmm. And so we made this gin with white pine, the state tree, right? And blue spruce, juniper, a little bit of coriander, and a little bit of orange peel.
Nice.
So the new tradition is every Thanksgiving we go up for dinner, we chop down a tree. They're all too big now. Uh-huh. So the top half is my Christmas tree, and the bottom half we just make into the next batch of gin.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So batch 3 has the bottom half of my Christmas tree in it. But it's great. It's a really special gin that's super unique to Michigan, mm-hmm. and it's a style of gin that nobody's really making. Mm-hmm. So it's a fun little thing to be able, especially with gin, you can experiment a lot. We just did very small batch gin as a fundraiser for Green Living Science.
Nice.
So we raised a little bit of money for that. They do environmental education in Detroit public schools.
Excellent.
So gin is a lot of fun,
Yeah.
right? It's instant gratification, whereas whiskey you have to wait for a while.
Got it.
Yeah.
So tell me what happened between your sort of making booze in the high school parking
Yes.
lot and Detroit City Distillery. So what was your journey in between there?
Wow. Well, it was a very interesting journey, I guess. I mean, so on a personal level, shortly after high school, kind of my early college days, I lost someone very important to me, and I was kind of a screw up.
Oh,
I was kind of having like a really good time, probably too much fun. So it kind of made me realize a little bit like, not everybody gets the luxury of making meaning in their everyday life. And so I felt like some ownership over being able to do that for the person I lost. So it kind of got me on the straight and narrow, which was good because I probably had a lot of potential. I was partying away. And so I went to school for urban planning.
Where'd you go?
I went to Michigan State.
Okay.
Environmental economics for undergrad and then urban planning for graduate degree.
Great.
And then after that, I moved to Seattle and did some consulting. And then I moved back to Detroit as part of this Detroit Revitalization Fellowship Program. And I kind of landed my dream job. So I was basically in charge of small business for the city. I worked at Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, which is like the economic development arm of the city.
Yeah.
And so, I was there for maybe 7 years or so and had, kind of a incredible dream run, really. So, got to help hundreds of entrepreneurs start businesses. We launched Motor City Match, which is a business competition that gives away $500,000 in grants every quarter.
Wow.
Along with a lot of other things. And so all these businesses are starting to come to fruition. And it's great. So, I walk around and everybody knows me. I'm not the guy giving away $500,000 anymore. So maybe I'm not,
Not as popular.
Maybe not
right?
as popular, but it's amazing kind of seeing everybody's dream come to fruition and having played a small part in that. So that's been a lot of fun.
Sure.
And then I basically decided that I needed to work on my own business instead of everybody else's. So I kind of took the leap. I was telling everybody they should. And I was like, maybe I should like put my money where my mouth is and like do this myself. So been full-time entrepreneur, free and clear of any distraction really since February. And I still do a little community development consulting work. Making booze is a great thing, but not necessarily changing the world.
Sure.
So, it's still important for me to be able to get back a little bit. So
it sounds like you are with the business, partnering with meaningful nonprofits and that kind of thing, which is a great way that entrepreneurs can use their talents and their money making to impact the world as well. So what are some ways that you think you make meaning? You've mentioned it, a bunch of times already, but I'm always fascinated by that, about how people find their purpose or they build connections that are really mutually beneficial. It sounds like you've done a ton of that in your work, and just personally, I think owning a business with 8 friends that you grew up with is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
That shared
we're all
history,
still friends.
That's actually phenomenal. Yes.
So making meaning, right? So like I said, there's layers to it, right? So, we find great meaning in how we actually run the day-to-day business, like actually making it, sourcing stuff from local farms. We partner with a local mill, Dexter Mill, that, helps us kind of process that raw grain into a flour that we make whiskey, walking across the street, to source botanicals from a local company, throwing events for nonprofits, all those sorts of things, playing with it in the history, and all those sorts of things are good. I think when you boil it all down, and you think about, well, how do I spend my time every day?
Sure.
Right. A lot of folks are, going to the job, clocking in, clocking out, collecting a paycheck, for me, and I've never really been able to think about it any other way. You do what you love.
Yeah.
It's not work. It's just what you do.
Sure.
And so, personally, it's very gratifying in being able to share that with other people. And, that's a fun thing about owning a bar too.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story.
Yep.
Right. Usually, those stories come out after a couple cocktails, and, bartenders are like amazing psychologists or amazing thought partners or all those sorts of things. So, to be able to kind of share that experience with a lot of people in a very casual way without any pretension or anything like that. And, that's kind of how we run our business because we're all friends. We're much more kind of family oriented. It's not all about the bottom line necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's a fun thing to be able to, our little clan of employees, is a lot like a family in a way, and helping them, get through school or helping a regular get through a tough week.
Yep.
Those sorts of things is very meaningful to us, and so we like to just be real. We are real. Like there's nothing really to it. So just being authentic and doing what you love every day. That's what it's all about. So.
Sounds like there's a book on the horizon, stories from the bar or stories from Detroit. I don't know. We need to work on that.
Sure. That could get interesting.
Well, we don't have to use names, right? Customer X came in and whatever,
Right.
But it's really interesting. When I was in college, I first heard that phrase, do what you love and the money will come.
Yeah.
And I always go back to that. If ever there's a stressful time where you're like, you lose a customer or you're looking to bring on a new kind of client or something, I try to get back to that because when I'm lost in the work and I'm just in the zone, it all works out.
I keep telling myself that.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, one of the challenges of entrepreneurship, right? So, at the end of the day, like small businesses are really just the people who work there. And I always tell folks that, it's just you.
Yes.
Like you are the small business.
Yes.
It's not necessarily what you're selling. It's you selling it.
Yep.
And so, that can be a very stressful thing, as you know.
Sure.
Right. And so I think it's important, and that's what the meaning behind it and doing what you love is what keeps you going.
Yes.
It's certainly not the paycheck most of the time for the vast majority of people.
Right.
It's that customer interaction. It's, giving people a little joy by, giving them a little piece of what you do.
Right.
And so that's the thing that I think kind of keeps small businesses going a lot of times. And, if everybody was doing it for the money, I think the vast majority of small business wouldn't exist.
They'd
right?
fold, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny, though. I think everybody thinks that if you own your own business, you're just rolling in the cash,
right.
which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
But what I think we're really rich in is the freedom to choose our time and our people.
Yes.
And I do love the work I do. You love the work you do. So even if I'm like trying to pay off bills or get rid of debt or whatever, I can go to my kids' field trip and I don't have to ask anybody's permission. I don't have to make up that time. I might be working at midnight, but to make up for it, but that's my choice. And I think that that's priceless.
I could not agree more. And, for me, I was an entrepreneur within a kind of more corporate, in this case, more kind of like quasi-governmental situation while I was the small business director at the DEGC. And so, that was like I could work every second of every day for the next 20 years and not even be close to doing all the things that need to be done in Detroit.
Right.
But when I left, being able to be, wake up every morning and be like, what do I want to do right now without having to ask anybody or without having the expectation of having to go in the office.
Sure.
Was like life-changing, mind-altering situation. And so now, I can never go back. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
No.
And so that is one of the beautiful things about being an entrepreneur is you are in charge of your own time. And, when you think about what is most valuable, money, time, right? I really do think it is time. And so you can choose how to spend every second of your day. I think it's important to balance it, right? Because it's not all just about the business, right? You got to have a life too.
Right.
And I think a lot of small business owners kind of get captured in that. And that's always been one of my challenges, right? Because the work is so meaningful and it's what I love.
Yep.
It's not the only thing I love. So, you really have to balance it. And I think that's probably a struggle that, pretty much every entrepreneur has to go through. Right. You can't make meaning in other people's life if you can't do it for yourself.
For sure.
So
there's always work to do, and you've got to balance that. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like to me you're selling Detroit, you're selling story, you're selling that family connection, that history. And that's, because anybody, they could buy whiskey anywhere.
Yes.
Yours is probably much better. I'm not a connoisseur, so
there's
I can't
a lot of good
attest,
stuff out there. Yeah.
But they're coming to you because you're Detroit, you're Michigan, you're, that family connection, the friendship. And I love the way you represent your business online. The photography is so gorgeous.
Yeah, thank you.
Really great marketing. But while I could talk to you all day, but we're going to have to wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to ask you two last questions.
Sure.
One, you said a person that you admire most is your dad.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about him and how he's been sort of an inspiration for you.
Yeah. So my dad supposedly retired this year, which is definitely not panning out. But so he started his company, a small landscaping company, the year I was born. Uh-huh. And so the thought of that, is already just seems, it seems daunting to me to bring a child into the world and start a business at the same time.
Right.
But, he was able to put myself and my sister through, undergrad, college, and, he's able to raise a family. And I always remembered, he owns a landscaping company. We have beautiful 40 acres out in the country. And he had a client come from Japan. Uh-huh. And he said, you are one of the richest people I've ever met.
Wow.
And my dad was like, I don't get it. And he's like, well, look at all that you have. Right.
Yes.
And so it was an amazing place to grow up. And, I really learned my work ethic from my dad. He's one of those people that just has to be doing something around the clock or else he just can't stop.
Sure.
Whether that's good or bad, it's definitely both, has kind of always influenced me to just work harder than everybody else. That's just kind of how we operate our business. And, that's oftentimes required, in an industry like this where there's a lot of established brands that have gazillions of dollars and, unlimited marketing budgets and those sorts of things. So to be able to stand out, you just really have to work harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
So.
So my last question would be, what advice do you have for people who are on that path of pursuit for meaning? What would you tell them when they're looking for their purpose?
Yeah. So, I think just be real and true to yourself. Like there's no reason to try to be something you're not. And I think in Detroit in particular, Detroiters are very attuned to when you're real and when you're not being real.
Yep.
And so, for us, we make spirits and, a lot of folks in the industry are not necessarily being real, right?
Sure.
So, right. It's a branding exercise. They're making up some story about some pre-prohibition recipe. It's not. It's like mass produced somewhere.
Right.
And repackaged, and they're trying to sell an authentic story. And I think today, especially, we always talk about like millennial, consumers and all that. Like they want a true, authentic story.
Yeah.
Like they want to be a part of it.
Sure.
So if if you believe like you are the small business, as the entrepreneur, and you're being real and truthful to yourself, like you'll find customers who align with that and value that. And I think that, is a great way to kind of give yourself confidence and like, understanding that everything will be okay because people are really kind of buying into you and your story.
Yep.
And so, telling stories and being real about it and finding a way for people to participate in it and connect their story to yours. That is the most important thing. And I think that's what's been setting us apart is because people want to be part of the resurgence in Detroit. People want to participate. They know when they buy a bottle of whiskey, they're supporting us as a small business. They're supporting some local farmers, people that make corks up in the thumb, all those sorts of things. So, people can participate in kind of the resurgence of Detroit and support multiple small businesses in one because they connect to our story, right? And they're feeling like they're a part of it too. So I think that's important to figure out.
It is important
to people.
I have to say, the cocktails on your menu are delicious.
Thank you.
But there's a story to each one, with the ingredients. And I had a hard time deciding. I remember I asked you, what am I getting?
Right.
And you're like, oh, this one. And it was fantastic. I don't know which one it was, but there's such authentic flavor and it's it's not processed. It's just so real, like you said.
Right.
I find that people can find their meaning if they go back to who they were before they started caring about what other people thought they were.
Yeah.
So when you look back to who you were at like 5, 6, 7, 8, that's the core, that's the purpose. And if you can get back to that, it'll carry you through, and it's easy. It's not work when you love it. You know?
Exactly.
So,
and you don't have to try.
Right, exactly.
Just be yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's been awesome talking to you.
Yes, thank
Mike
you.
Forsyth, Detroit City Distillery. Check him out, buy his spirits. But thank you for interviewing with me on the Make Meaning podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
All right.